Laura Beauparlant is 18 years old. She's driving home to school after having spent the weekend with family. She's thinking about the project that she's going to have to get to work on when she gets back, and she's not looking forward to it. But what Laura doesn't know is that her life is about to change. Coming in the opposite direction at 100 kilometers per hour is a drunk driver. The combined 200 kilometer per hour impact left Laura trapped and clinging to life. This is her story. It's a story of shock, pain, courage, and inspiration. In this first edition of ORTHOLINK, Laura will tell us her story of what happened in her own words. Good morning. With us is Laura Beauparlant. Good morning, Laura. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Laura has an amazing story to tell, and we'll get straight into it if you don't mind. I'd like to take you back to the beginning of this particular story that we want to talk about today. You're 18 years old. It's a November day. You were visiting your parents, I believe, and you were on your way back to school. Yep. I guess you were driving, and were you alone? So you're driving back. You're driving back. So what happened? What do you remember about what happened?
Well, and actually, technically, I wasn't 100% alone. I had my pet iguana in my car with me, who did survive the accident as well. She's like a little fun fact. Definitely something that the paramedics and firemen have never rescued before. So that made for an interesting story for them to be able to go home with. So I'm heading back. I've left my parents maybe 10 minutes earlier, 15 minutes tops. And I'm in the left-hand lane, the passing lane. I was passing a car, actually going the speed limit, pretty good for an 18-year-old. And all of a sudden I see headlights coming towards me, and I'm on a divided highway. So I'm definitely not somewhere that you would expect to see headlights. And of course, because there was a car I was passing on my left or my right, I couldn't swerve that way. So instinctually, I swerved towards the ditch, which I was later told was probably the factor that saved my life, because it was a 200 kilometer an hour head-on impact. And so instead of us hitting 100% dead on, we hit just a bit off center, driver's side to driver's side, and my vehicle spun around and ended up on the shoulder. And again, I've guardian angel or whatever you want to call it. I wasn't meant to die that day. I avoided being hit by oncoming traffic because of where my car landed after being hit initially. So it's been so long, and I don't dwell on that night, but it was absolutely terrifying. I was trapped in my car. I remember pushing the airbag kind of out of my face because it had deployed. And I will mention that airbag also saved my life. Because the steering wheel, when I came to a stop, was fully pressed up against my chest, and my legs and feet were sort of through the dash of my car. So had that airbag not been between me and the steering wheel, who knows? And that was at a time, this was 1995. And a few years earlier, my parents had to order that. Like that was like a checkbox when you bought a car in the early 90s. Like, oh, do we want to get a car with an airbag? Because they were new. And they thought, well, they're teenagers, they're younger drivers. Let's order the car with an airbag. Never in their wildest imagination would they have imagined that it would then go on to save my life.
Wow.
So,
thank goodness.
Yeah, I know, right? It's all those little things that you don't always think back, but you can always connect the dots, but looking backwards and go, wow, if they hadn't have bought that, or if these factors hadn't have happened, who knows? So what I do remember is a lot of people, stopping, a lot of people panicking. And and this one gentleman coming and staying by my side and holding my hand and keeping me conscious, kept talking to me through my window that was smashed out. And then, when the paramedics got there, they were able to get me out of my car and save my iguana as well, as I mentioned. And we were taken to the local hospital.
And so I'm sorry, you were conscious this whole time?
Yes.
You remember?
Yeah.
Okay. So your memories are pretty consistent, and you remember going to the hospital. Did you have any sense of your injuries?
No, I think because of shock and adrenaline, I didn't necessarily as memory serves me, I don't remember pain so much as fear, right? I remember hearing myself screaming at some point. I realized that it was me, but I don't know that it was from pain necessarily. I think it was just from this experience, what I had just gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's quite common. A lot of times when people are initially injured, you don't necessarily feel it immediately. And it wasn't until later in the hospital when they moved my leg to take an x-ray that I actually passed out from the pain. And that it was that moment where, because I'd been just sort of laying there on a backboard and a neck brace and very still. I do remember my mom making me laugh though. For some reason, I don't know why people use humor, but it was great. She made me laugh, and my chest hurt. It kind of hurt to laugh, but it was actually kind of a beautiful moment I remember having with my mom while she was, by my side in emergency.
So, do you remember at any point becoming aware, being told what your injuries were? Were you taken straight, for example, into surgery, and you were unconscious at that point? And how did that happen?
No, and the unfortunate thing was it took a number of hours. I don't think they even realized how severe my injuries were initially, because it was about 3 hours, because the drunk driver was actually injured worse than me. So he was taken care of first. And then it was hours later when I was taken in for x-rays, and that's when they realized, oh boy, this is severe. And the only thing I remembered hearing that night was that they described my leg as looking like cornflakes. It's one of those, coming in and out of consciousness, getting x-rayed. And I remember hearing that being said by somebody in the room. So I think at that point, I probably knew that it was pretty bad. It was an open compound femur fracture. So it was pretty severe. And the doctor there, they put me in traction. They kind of did what they could, but knew that they didn't have the capabilities to fix this, which is when I was sent to Sunnybrook.
You were sent to Sunnybrook, and that's where you came into the hands of Dr. Creeder. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So,
yep.
Dr. Creeder, we're going to talk to him, obviously, and we'll talk to both of you together. But when you came out of surgery, what had they done to repair your leg?
Well, initially I was put in traction, and then, as I said, it was a day or two later when I was sent to Sunnybrook. So there was a little bit of time, but I was on a lot of painkillers and, all of that. So my timelines aren't 100% clear. But what I do know is when I was sent to Dr. Creeder, he kind of put me back together like Humpty Dumpty, and I had 18 pins and a metal plate put in my leg that 18. He kind of pieced all of the bone back together.
Next week, in Chapter 2 of Laura's story, Laura's confronted by the extent of her injuries and the daunting path ahead. Join us. To learn more about the Foundation and how you can support our efforts, visit movepainfree.org.